This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every week, it's Rob Reinhold.
Hello, everybody. This is Rob with Maverick Trading, Maverick Currencies, and now Flat Earth Trading Society.
So for episode 39, this is a user-suggested episode. Now, for those of you who read the description all the way to the bottom, so for all 5 of you, it says, please don't suggest episodes. We're good for right now. And we were, and we still are. We got a lot of really great episodes, but I think it's time to start getting some ideas from you guys, the loyal viewers. And so I erased that sentence at the bottom. So now it's a little more open. We've already gotten a lot of requests for talking about automation. So that's going to be on the spreadsheet going forward. But this was something I got last week in the comments section. It said, could you talk about limiting beliefs? And I think this is a great idea. Rob, you and I had not really thought about this yet, but this plays a really big part in getting us to start trading in the first place because we just simply don't think we're good enough. And then it comes in another wave, at least one time, once we go through that period where we're just losing over and over and over again. So I thought it was a good topic for an episode.
I think it's a great topic for a trading episode, but this is more going to be a life episode for me. I cannot tell you how much I believe in what we're going to be talking about today, which is kind of ironic because that is what we're talking about today, is belief in, I don't want to call it the absurd, but belief in the delusion of what we want our lives to be.
Yeah, there are no limitations to Rob's belief in himself and what he's able to do, and really me neither. But early on, I guess, for me at least, I didn't start trading because I just thought there was so much you had to do and there's so much you had to know first, and I wasn't there. I didn't understand how the internet just changed everything and how easy it was to read a chart once you got there. So did you remember, Rob, when you first started out, were you just gung-ho, I'm going to kill this? Or was there a little bit of intimidation at first because of all you probably thought you had to know before you started?
Patrick, I wish I could tell a great story of me, not believing in myself, and then I rose up and I believed in myself. But no, I have been completely delusional my entire life. And let me tell you what I mean by that. When I played Little League football growing up, I remember my parents, they were talking to another one of the other parents and said, oh my gosh, that number 34, that little deaf kid, which I'm not deaf. I do have some hearing loss, but they're like, that little deaf kid, he just keeps going. He would run through a brick wall if they put him from him. He just never quits. Now, granted, they got that wrong. I was not deaf. But what they didn't get wrong is I've always been like this. I've always had full confidence in anything I can do, and I just literally keep working until I accomplish it. That is how I've run my life for the entire thing. And it's all genetic. It's all genetic.
Why did they think you were deaf?
Probably because I don't listen very well to instruction.
Okay. Well, there it is, everybody. So all I can really say is, I don't know if I was intimidated, but for me, the trading life was guys in shirt and ties, all getting into an office or a trading floor, some obnoxious, manager or boss who does a lot of cocaine, yelling at him with all these screens and stuff like that. I'm like, I still wouldn't mind that lifestyle, but it just seems like a lot to learn. And where do I go learn it? How much does it cost? So I guess those were my limiting beliefs. They weren't really limiting beliefs in myself, but just the prerequisites for getting into this business, because this was the 2000s. And I just didn't know enough about it. But I know there are some of you out there who simply have limiting beliefs that you will not be able to excel at a very high level. So let me explain why that's not absurd. You guys might have heard me talk about on this channel, especially early on, the fail rate when it comes to Forex trading. And this is a number I grabbed out of the air, but if it's not dead accurate, I don't know what is. So it's a 99.9% fail rate. So 999 out of 1,000 traders. Rob, you can agree or disagree on this, that's fine. But when I say fail rate, I think everybody who starts this has a dream to be able to do this full-time or at least supplement another income. And I would say maybe 1 out of every 1,000 actually get there. I mean, you have to think of all the people around the world who try this, all the rogue traders out there who have no chance of succeeding. That was the fail rate we're up against, and that number has not changed. If you know odds, those are really, really long odds. What are the chances you're going to be that 1 out of 1,000 that makes it? So I can understand. I can understand that right off the bat.
Well, Patrick, we have pointed out several times in this podcast that you are a J. J's like binary answers. And so this whole thing of succeed and fail, first off, you have to quantify what that even means. If your idea of success is the guy with 10 mansions that has made all of his money off of trading and he drives Ferraris and does whatever he wants, or woman that does that, then yeah, you're probably right. That probably is 1 in 1,000. You're probably right. But the true answer to that question, it's a distribution along the bell curve. And so do more people, again, monetarily lose more than make money in the world of trading? I'd say probably yes. I'd say yes. It's probably somewhere in the maybe 70 to 80% of people in the end of with their trading lives, they've lost more than they've made. Okay, I'll agree with that. But there's a whole lot of people that have made a little bit, lost a little bit. It's all this big, long spectrum. So it really depends on what your classification of success is. If it's on a beach with Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and a private plane, I'll agree with your number. But there's a whole bunch of stuff in between success and failure on my...
Well, for sure. It's impossible to quantify that way. But the same thing I said in those videos is I would be willing to bet that most people got into this business because they wanted something more. Not just a little something more to supplement whatever, but, a comfortable amount of money or something that would replace their job, which, again, really, really tough to do. So that's why I put that number out there. I had to pick something, and so that's what it was. But what Rob says is correct, too. All depends on what you want out of life, and everybody's very different. So, but it's still long odds either way. So that's just the truth. This is what we are looking at. And another episode, I don't remember the number, Rob, but it's not like we got a ton of support early on either. My family didn't want me to do this. Most of my friends thought it was silly. So yeah, I didn't have a lot working for me except just this crazy belief that I could do it. But luckily I had that because I had all these forces pushing against me. I can only imagine if I didn't have that, how tough it would have been to even start.
Yeah, we talked about this in one of the first episodes when we talked about nature versus nurture. And nature is a huge part of who we are, why we do what we do, our personality, who we are as a person, really drives a lot of these decisions. But there's absolutely a big part of who you are today that is because of the early influences in your life. And if you had positive influences, that most likely push you into some positive directions. If you had negative influences, you now have more obstacles in your way that you're going to have to get over. And sadly, that is just the reality of life. But those obstacles can be overcome.
Yeah, and I think I entered the game with a chip on my shoulder already and just a frustration with the way my life was going. And so I think that propelled me forward as well. So it's one of those things, traders, to where I don't feel like this really applied to me. But man, it would have been difficult to start had I had these limiting beliefs before I even started trading. Rob, can you think of any other limiting beliefs that people might have that would prevent them from getting into this game in the first place?
There is a long laundry list of limiting beliefs. The number one I always hear is money. Yeah, money. Some people were able to have more access than other people to money in the first place. Guess what? There have been a lot of people that have ultimately succeeded in life that started with zero. Now, granted, their life was a lot more difficult than the people that started off with an inheritance of $500,000. And frankly, some people start off with an inheritance of $100 million, and their life is very easy when it comes to money. But guess what? That person is going to have a limiting belief in there somewhere. Maybe they feel like they're not smart enough. Maybe because they got that $100 million in inheritance, they don't learn work ethic. And now they have a problem with their life because they're not used to hard work and they don't have any fulfillment of life. There are so many limiting beliefs that every single person has, and there's not one person that doesn't have at least one. That's why this episode is so important, because you're going to have them, whatever it is. Everything can be overcome with work, effort, and time. Yes, it's going to be harder for some. I get that. And yes, maybe you didn't get exactly where you wanted to be, but you got somewhere. That's better than sitting where you are.
And when you first said money, I'm like, well, Rob, that's not a limiting belief. That's a thing. But I was missing the point. It's not so much the money itself. It's the insecurity behind not having a lot of it. And say, okay, well, all these people have money. I don't. I must be doing something wrong. I must not be smart enough. So many different ways you can go with that.
Yeah, and if you think about it, lack of money is not a lack of belief. It's just a lack of where you are at the moment. However, humans use these reasons to not go work hard and try hard. Because look, hard work is hard. That's why we call it hard work. It's tough. It's challenging. There's failures along the way. And so when you look forward to this path, okay, what do I need to do to get money and capital for trading? You know that everything you have to do is unpleasant. You know it's hard work. You know it's going to be you hustling and asking people for help. And so you're going to come up with all these limiting beliefs just so you don't have to undergo that difficult process. That's what humans do all the time. Because if you go through the process, you get to the end. If you want to lose weight, look, I know it's easier for some people to lose weight than others. This is actually a great example. Me, it's always been very easy for me to lose weight. My wife has always had a much more difficult problem. We have the same diet, we do the same exercise, the weight just falls off me. For her, it's stubborn. She has a more difficult time, but she has been able to achieve it through harder work. Sadly, it took harder work for her to do it than me, but she did it. The end result is a guarantee if you put in the work and effort. But the beliefs are just there because you know how hard it's going to be and you know how long it's going to be. And sometimes you're just tired. Sometimes you don't have it in you. That's what it is. It's all of these limiting beliefs are just to keep you from not have to experience pain and difficulty. That's a mechanism your body will put up to keep you from pain and difficulty.
And I would even wager to say an early solution to this, regardless of what the limiting beliefs are, is just your own lack of knowledge. I think when you don't know or understand something, it seems really intimidating. Like, oh, I couldn't possibly get there. It would take me a really long time. I've said this on my channel. Learning how to trade Forex, learning how to read a chart does not take a long time. So you can get rid of that right there. Things that were intimidating a week ago could be almost common knowledge now. It's like chess. Easy to learn, lifetime to master. I get that. But as far as the learning part goes, it's a lot easier than people think. And I think if people just understood that, I think some of those limiting beliefs would go away.
As I said, it's actually a guarantee. The end result is a guarantee if you put in enough time, effort, and work. Now, I told you that I was never held back by limiting beliefs. I just always thought I could do everything. It's total delusion because I can't do everything. I'm now close to 50, and I've had 17 surgeries, Patrick. And it's because I had no limiting beliefs. I could do whatever I wanted. I was invincible. And so I broke myself a bunch of times doing stuff that I couldn't do. But that's always how I've lived my life. On the other hand, my son. I told you in an earlier episode that I named my son with the middle name of Danger. I wanted him to be able to say, Danger's my middle name. And that kid turned out to be a very cautious kid. And he was one of the ones that was, unlike me, was always like, well, Dad, I'm not any good at it. And the thing I would say is, well, of course you're not any good at it. You've never done it. No one was ever good at it the first time they did it. The point of getting good at something is you have to go through the process. And every time he used that, well, Dad, I'm not very good at it. And every time he did it, he would get frustrated because he wasn't very good at it. And I would have to explain to him, no, listen, the only way to get good at something is to go through this process. And if you want to be good at it, you have to completely accept that you have to go through a process for 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. That is just how life works. And it was a constant battle with him to get him over those first steps because it's very difficult. Those first steps, they are tough. You aren't very good. You stink. You fail all the time. And if you have those limiting beliefs, you're going to quit. But the end result's a guarantee if you keep going.
So as you were talking about that, I thought of another question, and this isn't even on the outline, so I'm just going to throw this one at you impromptu. Let's say that I am from a poor country, and when I see successful traders and people doing really well in the financial world, I don't see people who look like me. I don't see people who live where I live. This is just not a game for somebody like me in my situation. I know what I see. What would you say to somebody like me who just thinks I'm kind of doomed from the start because of my location and my situation and where I grew up?
I think we can go right back to where this episode started with you, Patrick, with you saying that 1 out of 1,000 people succeed. That kind of thought process is very limiting. If you reframe success and failure as, I'll be better in the future than if I sat here and did nothing, all of a sudden, you reframing it that way, if you're saying, I'll never get to be that billionaire on a beach with Lamborghinis, Maseratis, actually Maseratis aren't even that nice of a car anymore, Bugattis. If that's what your definition of success is, yes, that is almost impossible to get to. It is the same thing as someone here in America that is saying, I want to be an NFL football player. Do you know how hard it is to be an NFL football player? You can't get there by willpower alone. You have to be a genetic freak and have the willpower to get there. So setting yourself up for that's what success is, you are setting yourself up for failure. So let's take this away from a binary of Bugattis, girls on the beach, whatever it is your thing is, and you go to a spectrum of, hey, if I stay where I am, I'll probably stay in the same place and do the same thing. I don't want to be there in my life. You're going to be somewhere better. I don't know if that means you're going to be making as much money as you wanted to trading Forex. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're making a fraction of what you wanted to. But that is success. You have to understand that is success. And if you apply this to every part of your life, I promise you, you may not end up with a Bugatti, but I promise you by the end of your life, you are not going to be unhappy about it.
And I think that's a really good answer, too. And the only thing I would say, don't set your sights on Lamborghinis and Bugattis, because I don't think that's very realistic, even for some of the top traders out there. But maybe as you mature and get older, your expectations will moderate out a little bit. Let's just put it that way. Let's just shoot for a little more money and some economic freedom, and then kind of work your way from there. Now, the only other, before we start getting into the second half of this, the only other limiting belief that I've heard in the past from people, on my own channel, is I just don't think I'm smart enough to do this. And for starters, that's a very rare thing to say. I think even people on the lower end of the IQ spectrum don't really think they're as low IQ as they actually are. I think everybody thinks they're smarter than they are. I thought that took a lot of humility to sit back and say, you know what? I know where I sit on that spectrum, and I don't sit very high. And so that bothers me. And this is something that it seems like a game built for very, very smart people. So, Rob, I'd like to get your take on this real quick. And believe me, towards the end of this episode, I have the solution to end all solutions for this. But, Rob, I would wager to say, as somebody who always tested out as high IQ as a kid, I haven't taken a test since. I'm sure I got dumber. But I think most high IQ people constantly stumble and get in their own way when it comes to trading. I can tell this from my comments too. People constantly sitting there trying to overthink something that's really not that complicated to begin with. I think not being super high IQ in this situation is actually an advantage. What do you think?
It is. And I'm going to refer everybody to chapter 2 of the book, The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. If you've never read the book, I highly recommend you read the book. The first chapter is all about success, what it means to have success, and goes through a lot of the super successful people in the world. The second chapter is about intelligence, and it talks about the most intelligent human being that's ever been measured, and how terrible his life was. He was well over 200 points. They couldn't measure it. He just had no idea. But he didn't have social stuff. He didn't have all the other things that cause people to have a good life. He couldn't keep a job because he was such a jerk. He was insufferable. He was everything. And his life ended up being really poor. What they've actually found is that you don't want to be high intelligence. You actually want to be more in the middle. And to even bring this point even more home, we've been recruiting for prop traders at Maverick Trading for well over 20 years. I have told my recruiters, I would rather have somebody who is humble and can follow the rules than someone who is high intelligence and cocky. I don't want that person. I want the humble person that will willing to grind this out and follow rules. So I have specifically instructed my recruiters to not bring the high intelligence, high ego people on because they are problems. They flame out. The other people, they grind it away and they do great.
Perfectly said. I mean, again, I don't know where I fall on the spectrum now. I knew where I fell when I was a kid. But the amount of times I have, quote, fought my way out of a good trade has to be in the hundreds. You brought up the Malcolm Gladwell book, which I've read too. There was another book you were talking about earlier, and I want to kind of mention this before we get into the second part of the show. That's I don't know how to even feel about this, Rob. Why don't you just tell us what it is?
When you sent me the outline and I saw the title for it, I just kind of laughed because literally like a day before, I had just ordered a book. And this book is called The Expectation Effect by David Robson. And on the title page, it says, How Your Mindset Can Change Your World. And I want to read just a little bit of the front cover of just so you understand what this book is about. Now, look, I can't say anything more about it because I literally haven't even read one page. So I know nothing about this book. But the reason why I bought it was exactly what we're talking about today. So here's what it says. You've heard of the placebo effect and how sugar pills can accelerate healing. But did you know that when people believe stress is beneficial, they become measurably more creative when placed under stress? Do you know that simply visualizing exercise can boost your muscular growth? Or that associating aging with wisdom can add 7+ years to your lifespan? Such is the power of the expectation effect. What we think will happen changes what does happen. Now, this is not a book about the universe. I don't read those kind of books. This is a scientific book about scientific studies that has studied the placebo effect. I don't read books like The Secret. Now, here's the funny thing is my wife, she does read those kind of books, and she loves them. And we'll be sitting down talking, and she'll tell me about the book she's reading about how you just have to ask the universe, and the universe will give it to you. And she looks at me, and she's like, oh my gosh, you think I'm crazy, don't you? And I say, no. I'm actually reading the same book, except it's different. In your book, what's happening is external. The universe is giving it to you. In my book, what's happening is internal. You are creating it. It is the same concept. And frankly, whether it is the universe that's giving me what I have predetermined I'm going to do, whatever. If the universe gave it to me, who cares? Who cares? I got to where I wanted to go. If I created it, great. That's what happened. So I can't tell you how much I believe in this, and I'm very excited to read this book because I want more about the scientific studies and the scientific proof. And I remember a teacher when I was in high school telling me about quantum mechanics. And they told me a story about how they had people go into TV rooms with TVs. All the rooms were identical with the same TV. And in half the TVs, they had people yell at the TVs and tell them how bad they were. And half the TVs, they told them how good they were. And the bad TVs broke down much faster than the ones that were told they were good.
Get the F out of here.
Your mind has power. It has real power. Your thoughts have real effects in this world, not just to you, but to the people around you. Now, look, that is pseudoscience at this point. That's pseudoscience, and I don't have any studies that will prove that to you. But I'm pretty confident that somewhere in the future, we will have those studies that show that your thoughts have literal power behind them.
All right. You had me until the yelling at the TVs part. But no, I think when you read the jacket of that book, it sounded really intriguing. A little bit did kind of sound like The Secret, but some of it sounded like things that were perfectly plausible. So yeah, maybe hopefully we'll get a nice little episode that proliferates from that book. Who knows? But let us know what you find, Rob. Now, moving on to the other part of this, I guess, is the limiting beliefs that come up as you're trading, whether that's a year in, 2-3 years in, whatever the case is. When you go through, I always say, give it a year and see how you do. Not all years are going to be good. What if year 3 or 4 is just an overall bad year? We've talked earlier on the show of why this might be, but these limiting beliefs are still going to pop up. And these limiting beliefs are going to say things like, well, I see these people who are really successful, Rob, and they seem to have a lot of success early on. Like it just takes a year or two and they're on easy street. These are the examples I see on YouTube. And, I know a guy who 2-3 years down the road became a professional trader and he quit his job. I'm at year 3, year 4, and I just had the worst year of my life. Maybe I'm just physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally not cut out for this. What would you say to somebody like that?
That's a great question because it will happen to every single one of you. I remember in 1999, after I took my big loss from phone.com, I told that story a couple episodes ago, I had about a 1-month period where I really sat and thought, is this really how I want to live my life? Like, this is a really rocky up and down life. Is this really what I want? I challenged it. I questioned it. I had a new daughter that I had to take care of. There was a lot of stress. I ultimately decided this is what I did want to do. And I ultimately decided that I'd do whatever it took to get there. And yeah, everyone gets to that point. I have worked with lots and lots of traders over the years. And there's something I call the hump. Getting over the hump in trading is very hard. Now, we have a saying at Maverick that traders aren't born, traders are forged. Being forged means that you're put through heat and pressure and hammered until you come out a harder metal than you were before. 0 people were born as successful traders. Sure, people started trading, had success, but in the end, they lost it because they didn't have the skills to keep it. So, with that belief that 0 people are born profitable traders, then you understand, it's just a matter of time, effort, and work. And so if you start out as a losing trader, you don't jump from losing trader to superstar trader. That's not how life works. It's a process. So losing trader turns into not losing as bad trader. That's discouraging. You just put in 6 months worth of effort and now you're just not losing as bad. You put in more effort, maybe a year or 2 into it, you're break even. That's really tough to deal with. You put in all this time and effort and you're still at break even? You haven't even got there? Understand, break even is a stop along the way. But if you set yourself up to be one of these 1 out of 1,000 and you don't have your Bugatti yet, you could quit. You could easily quit at that point. And then you keep working and working and you become a slightly profitable trader after 3 to 5 years. And again, I'm just throwing these years out there. This is not how long it actually takes. It might be long for some of you, might be shorter for some of you. But at some point, you're going to be slightly profitable, and that's going to be discouraging. And you're going to have all the limiting beliefs come up of why you shouldn't go on. If you want to, go on. Look, if you quit, big deal. I mean, honestly, I'm not saying that to be flippant, but there might be a better path in your life. There might be something else for you to do. But if you decide to go on, just put your head down, because moderately or mildly profitable traders turn into moderately profitable traders, and then they turn into profitable traders and then wildly profitable traders. If you understand it's a process, and then you determine that you're willing to go through all the steps, whether it takes 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, the end is guaranteed. You will be further along the path than you were when you started.
And I really like how you said profitable traders. Because here's the main point I want to hammer home to everybody. There is no such thing as a good or a bad trader. Does not exist. So follow me on this, Rob. I think that I know, and you probably know this too from all the years you spent, running a prop firm. There's no such thing as somebody who's just inherently a good or a bad trader. What there are people who are better at following a system. It's what this entire podcast is based on. Taking a system, almost regardless of what it is. You're doing the Flat Earth Trading Society, for Christ's sake. There's no rhyme or reason for anything you're doing, but you're following it to the letter. And so, true or false, your best, I'm doing air quotes, traders are simply people who can stick to the system better than everybody else, right?
Absolutely. And they're the people that have put in more time, work, and effort than others.
Yeah. So if you have any limiting beliefs, either before you start or in the middle somewhere, thinking, I'm just not good at this, it has nothing to do with you being good or bad at trading. It all has to do with the amount of time you're willing to put in, the amount of crap you're willing to go through before you get to the end, and how well you can stick to a system without screwing it up. Simple as that. Is there anything else you want to end on, Rob?
I want to talk about both my kids here because, of course, I'm a proud father, but raising kids was such an enjoyable process to me because I've learned all this stuff over the years. I've been studying this stuff for 25 years. So when my kids were born, I tried to put all of this positive stuff into them as early as I could, as much as I could. I treated them like science experiments to see if I could turn these little blobs into these awesome human beings. Look, they're in their early 20s yet. They're still working on things. But I told you about my son. My son was the one who always had the limiting beliefs. And he was always like, I'm not good. And then I would tell him, of course you're not good. Nobody is good at this when they start, whether it was soccer, whether it was piano, whatever it was. No one was good. Yes, there are some people that are better than others when they first start. But in the end, every single concert pianist put in thousands of hours of time and work. That should not limit you at all. With my daughter, I had someone who was much more optimistic. And with her, I always told her that your beliefs are a delusion. And what I mean by that is that your beliefs of what's going to happen to you in the future, it is delusion. We don't know what's going to happen. We have no control over it. Actually, sorry, we do have control over it. That's the point of this whole episode. But you're looking forward in the future. And you're looking at how you see yourself today. And I told her, I said, you could look at yourself today and say, I'm no good, I'm a loser. Or you could look at yourself today and say, oh my gosh, I'm amazing. Now, you could be a loser today. If you're a loser today, and again, I hate the term loser, but we'll just keep with it. Let's say that my daughter was a loser that day. But from that day on, she believed that she was the most amazing human being that's ever been on the earth. And she walked out of her bedroom after crying with that confidence. Her life would be better because of it. If she left that room with, I'm the worst person ever, I'm a loser, that downward spiral gets worse for her. I said, look, you can choose to believe your delusion is going to be amazing. You can choose to see yourself as amazing today, or you could choose to not see it. You have the choice. Why not be delusional on the positive side? What? Why? Look, if you're not a great trader right now, believe you are. It doesn't change anything today, but what it does, it changes something tomorrow. Just believe it. Just believe, oh, I'm so bad right now, but this is just a step along the way. Because next month, I'm going to be only slightly worse or slightly better. I'm only going to be terrible, not horrible. If you have that belief system, all of these limiting beliefs that come up, you're going to just knock them down one by one by one by one. And what that means is you're progressing and progressing and progressing. And then one day you literally will be a good trader. You literally will be a mildly profitable trader, a moderately profitable trader. You will get there. So you may as well delude yourself today that you are the greatest thing in the world, because it is so positive for you in your life. That's what I want to end up with. You may as well believe it, because it's going to be better for you than if you do.
And I'm going to go ahead and end this in a kind of a different direction and tell a story probably about 10 years ago. I came back to my hometown for a little while and hung out with some of my high school friends. And in this time, I'd gotten a lot more fit than I was before. Lost some bad weight, put a little bit of muscle on. And most of my friends had not done that. So I'm out hanging out with a couple of them. And I don't even want to say his name. But I've always had this one friend who's really never maxes out his own potential. Very smart, but kind of lazy. Starts a lot of projects, never finishes them. And it was such a typical question for him to ask. He's like, dude, you're looking good. He goes, and God, it's such a typical question for this guy. He says, what was the one thing you eliminated to get yourself in shape? Now, most people should be laughing right now. It's never one thing. It's never like, oh, I got rid of sugar or carbs or fat or whatever, right? And the answer I gave him was the opposite of what he wanted to hear. I said, the number one thing I got rid of was excuses, plain and simple. I had a hard time getting in shape. I always came up with reasons why it couldn't happen or reasons why this failed or this failed. And what I want to pass on to everybody who's listening right now is we've approached this episode with a very soft hand, talking about limiting beliefs and how, they're all in your head and you can do it in this. Just make sure that what you call a limiting belief is not anything more than a simple excuse, because those are going to take you down no matter what. No matter what we say, no matter how we draw this out, no matter how much we tell you that it doesn't matter how smart or not smart you are, that this whole thing can be achieved. If you don't start getting rid of these limiting beliefs, or even more so these excuses, then yeah, maybe you shouldn't start. These things have to go first, because you can't have these things hanging on you the entire time. Rob, do you have anything to say to that before we wrap it up?
I love how you ended this, Patrick. You're right. We've had a very soft hand all episode long. And in the end, these limiting beliefs are excuses. And remember, I said, this is your body's defense mechanism to keep you from struggling, from working hard, and from having pain. This is the excuse. This is the reason why you don't want to go through that. If you don't know how to do that, then you're right. Maybe you shouldn't trade. Frankly, maybe you should just do nothing. But if that's not you, or you decide, I'm not going to be that person anymore, because remember, you get to choose your delusion. Choose it. No more excuses. It's only to avoid struggle, pain, and difficulty. Embrace that. Revel in it. Just like I read in that book, people that take on stress, they find stress to be pleasurable, and they act very well under it. So stop having excuses. Stop limiting yourself. You have all the control in the world to believe what you want. You may as well believe it. That's all I got.
I love it. And on that note, we have 2 programming notes for you. The first one is what I was talking about earlier. Feel free to request episodes. I would just ask, make sure we haven't talked about it already. And just know that we may or may not use it. Or maybe we feel like we can't create an entire episode around it. And maybe, I think we're due for this, Rob. I think we'll probably just end up doing a rapid-fire Q&A episode sometime down the line. But also know that we will be off for American Labor Day. So when Labor Day comes around in early September, do not expect a Trading Psychology podcast episode then. But we will keep things going before and after that. So thank you all for joining us here for episode 39, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.